to get to our next one. The question is, can you convert public finance into smart finance? And we have some people that are going to come to address this. You've heard from him a couple of times today. We're thrilled to have an old friend back on stage. One more time, Matthew Gamster, the CEO of the SME Finance Forum. As well, Candace Johnson, the president of EBAN, is back on stage, back in action. We've seen a lot of her today. Very happy to have her. And as well, Bellini Shin, who I met recently for the first time in Berlin, in Germany, at the SME Finance Forum. She is the Director of External Alliances for the Bolstra Group. Yasin? And I'm looking for one more. Yasin S. Al-Sarur, the Chairman of the Saudi International Chamber of Commerce. Yasin, you've got your fan club. You're going to have to tear them away and come on up and join us. He's also an ICC Executive Board member and WCF G20 representative, all the way from Saudi Arabia. Matthew Gamser, I leave this panel in your capable hands.
Thank you so much, and I'm honored to moderate yet another panel, but we're at that real long tail part of the day, so we will try to be our best to be lively. You see, we have the highest ratio of women on a panel today, which is, we are very fortunate, we guys on the other side, and you are fortunate too, because we're going to have to talk about a subject that can be kind of dry, which is the endless debate about what governments can do to help angel investing. However, we're doing it in a very unusual way because there's absolutely no one here on the panel that represents government. So let me just, to know who we're talking to, how many people out there work for government ministries or regulators? Raise your hands. So there's no, I think I saw a hand in the way back, but there's almost no one representing government in the room. So that means we can be, there's another, we can be reasonably honest, but we also have to admit that we're coming at this. I'm the closest thing to a public servant, and I'm an international bureaucrat. I don't have the authority to regulate anything anywhere. But so with that, I want to introduce, let the panel introduce themselves, and I will start with Bellini, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Bellini Queen from China, and I am with Bolstra Group. We are a full-service company. We're a private company, and we do trade service, financial service, and social service. I'm here to talk about the financial service we do. We do supply chain finance. What we do is we essentially we lend money to SMEs within China and globally. Our interest rate is 4.8. I don't know if I should announce that here. And it's pretty low for SMEs. And those SMEs should be and they have to be suppliers of big mega companies. And for the PPP part, we do partnership, private, public partnership with the government. And our interest rate is from 6%, IRR is from 6% to 30%. If any of the family office or investment fund is co-GP with us, their IRR could go up to 30%. And I know we're here to talk about angel investment, and I see, let me be honest here, I don't see that many good angels. I see fake angels worldwide. And well, Matt just mentioned that angel investors, they're kind, they're helping out companies, startups to learn, to mentor, to be successful. But a lot of angels, I think they have the money to burn, but they don't know where to invest in. And I don't know the IRR for angel investment in general, but if they know that they can invest in PPP and get 30% IRR, I think they should put maybe 60% of their money or maybe 40% to something stable. Well, that's just unrelated, but in talking about the G20 countries and what the government can do, I think in China, what we do is we do PPP with science parks. And I know someone from the International Science Park is here. And I think if the government is stable and they invest in science parks, then there would be many projects or companies, SMEs, startups for angel investors to choose from. And also, I think that in terms of how to collaborate with angel investors, I think it's possible to co-fund or co-invest a fund that could invest in the PP project and then later on move that project or move on to the SMEs or suppliers to the PPP projects. I think that's everything about our work. Sorry, that's long.
Thank you, Bellini. And I think you're going to need an agent because there's probably going to be a big queue of people queuing up to find how they can get 4% money from Bolstra in an environment, whether it's in Turkey or anywhere in the neighborhood of here, for quite some distance. But I'll leave you to figure out how to handle your agency you're going to have to establish to handle all the people from this meeting. But Candace, you've been widely introduced already. But
right.
Let's talk about what's been your experience with government and government's intersection with angels, and whether there's anything you can point to that government should do or even should not be doing.
Yes. So by the way, Bellini and I had a heated discussion in the phone, which was a lot of fun when we were preparing this discussion, this panel. So first of all, I am, as you probably have figured out, I am very much a free marketeer. Somebody was saying, in another panel, don't wait for the government to do something for you. Well, I've never waited for the government to do something. I'm pretty much, known for having said in the early 80s that regulation never stopped anything good from happening. I was known as a monopoly breaker when governments owned telcos, and I broke those telco monopolies, which I'm very happy about. I think, I have a very dear friend who was the telecoms minister of Germany, Dr. Schwarz-Schilling. And he used to call me all of the time in the early 90s. And, finally I said to him, Dr. Schwarz-Schilling, why are you calling me? You are the minister of telecommunications of Germany, and I am just this, little entrepreneur. And he goes, Miss Johnson, he goes, governments can set policy. Governments can deregulate, but governments cannot do, and I need you to do. And from that day on, it was very clear to me what I needed to do. I needed to do, because governments cannot do. Entrepreneurs do. And so concerning angel investing, I've been working very, very hard as president of EBAN, which we are now going to be 20 years old in 1919. So we're starting this Euroinvest Roadshow this coming Thursday. And, so we are, quote unquote, a mature organization. And so, I have been trying to make certain that every single initiative that is taken with the government, that it is the angels, it is the private market and the private investor who are leading. So I also always say, lead, follow, or get out of the way. So in any co-investment scheme, it must be the business angel who is leading and the government can follow. So I'm very proud. We will finally have a pilot co-investment that we will be announcing fund also on Thursday. It took 3 years to get there, 3 years, and time is money. So who in the world has, time to put together, to put, 3 years? Well, we did it because we wanted to show that it could be done, et cetera. But in the meantime, we also started at least 2 or 3 other funds, which we just funded, ourselves, and we didn't do it with the government. I always go back to my wonderful friend and the minister, and, I call it the social contract. I have a responsibility to do because that is what governments expect entrepreneurs to do. And I expect them to put in a framework that is good for entrepreneurs and good for angel investors. Certainly one of those things is tax incentives in those countries where there are tax incentives. There are not always tax incentives, but or taxes, but where those countries do, that's great. Tax incentives also on capital gains to help exits come along. So there are lots of things that that governments can do to support the private investor going forward. And my goal is to create a nation of investors in Europe where the private people invest in the next generation.
Thank you. I think it was the late E.F. Schumacher who said, find out what people are doing and help them to do it better, which is, I guess, if I would sum up my main takeaway from your advice to governments, it's don't be out front. Figure out how you can support from behind what you're seeing the sector do.
It drives me crazy when, governments do our job. It drives me absolutely crazy because they don't do it as well as we do.
Now Yasin, you haven't been as introduced to people, so please, and you wear many caps. You're the chairman for Saudi Arabia of the ICC. You're the president and CEO of a major investment group, and you're an investor in your own right. What's your take on all this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Matt. And before I start, I would like to thank my friend Piper for the great forum and this beautiful city. First of all, I'm here, of course, representing the International Chamber of Commerce, but as a private, we are an investment company. And we are running actually two funds, 90% of our business mainly in PPP project and infrastructure. And due to the market development, we start a new fund for a startup company. So going back to your question, what make us developing this business, or what is the challenge also for the angels? If you allowed me, I would like to focus mainly on the PPP project. I was involved in the government as an advisory in certain of government for PPP project, and now I'm a developer and investor, so I know the issue on both sides, like government side and the private sector. First of all, we need to agree that we never came across all over the world there's angels investment in PPP project as of now. And the reason actually for that is most of the PPP project is really larger projects. And what's the reason actually for any government to launch a PPP project? Number one, of course, to encourage the investment. Number two is transfer of technology. And number three of efficiency, of course, of the project. But due to the large investment, mainly if we look at PPP project today is mainly in infrastructure, roads, airport, power plants. I can see from my side that angels, they don't still fit in this business as of now. Number one, on PPP project in government, angels investors, they're not yet recognized on the government PPP projects. That's number one. Number two, as an investor, if you look at any PPP project, you will find a financial institute or a developer or technical developers. So angels actually is a private investment whereby there is a huge risk. If they go to any PPP project on the early stage, the cost of the development of the project, it could be very risky, which represent a huge part of the project. The other thing that the financial institute or the lenders or the export finance, would they really recognize angels investors as a private individual in PPP project? And number three, of course, you need the government guarantee or the government offtake or a government recognition. And as of now, we don't see really any angels on PPP project. That's the only challenge I can see. But we don't say there is no room. I think there is still room for angels to be part of the project development. Listening to all the speakers today, most of the angels investors, they're looking for like low return of investment, a long-term investment. If you look at the PPP project, actually, you have quite reasonable IRR investment, and you have also quite return or time frame of investment. Like some of the project, you can do it as a bridge loan for 7 years, whereby actually you don't do any project finance. So you do your finance from the financial institute. So by the 7 years that you're returning your own operation, for example, you'll be returning all your investment. So what I suggest to any angels that if they are really interested to any of the PPP project, I think the best way is to go through the co-investors or the biggest player to be more recognized in PPP.
So, but you come from the Gulf region, and the Gulf region has at the same time, it has a lot of people who are fairly wealthy, but it also has a structural mission that all the countries are signing on to transform their economies from dependency on large extractive industries to a more mixed economy with other types of companies. But as we heard today, the tradition is to invest in real estate, what could governments do to encourage more of these people who have surplus capital to consider angel investing as an alternative to the prevailing real estate speculation?
If you allowed me, Matt, to just talk about maybe the Saudi experience, okay? I mean, I'm sure that everybody heard that Saudi Arabia, they came up with the 2030 vision, whereby actually they're going to transfer most of the project to be a PPP to the private sector. So in Saudi Arabia, 70% is young, they're youth. SMEs, we'll not talk about SMEs, but from those people, they're angels, they're wealthy investor, private investor, family houses. So the government, they come up with this vision whereby, I mean, the angels or the SMEs, now they contribute 20% to our GDP. By 2030, we are looking that they will contribute 35% to our GDP. So what we should do to them? So what we did in Saudi Arabia, we create a fund. They call it actually a youth fund, which is 10 billion, a fund. And this is mainly helping the youth, regardless they are angels or SMEs, to participate in the government project. So my colleagues, what she said earlier, we introduced, like, for example, free tax to the angels. We have an incentive. We have almost like zero interest financial rate to help them to participate in the project, because we're looking that the future will be the youth or will be the angels to take over.
Very interesting. So putting some co-investment money out there, which is also something that Candace had talked about. And China, you talked about the investment in infrastructure like technology parks, which is another form of co-investing to try to create the structures needed. Bellini, what do you think, China is the largest crowdfunding market in the world. I think it's probably, when I last checked, about 60% bigger than the United States, which means it's much, much bigger than Europe. So lots of individuals are connecting to deals, but you don't hear about angels in China. Why is this, do you think?
Well, I think there are so many angels in China, and they invest in their neighbors, in their daughters, in their family people. Because I think angel investment is very, very risky, because it's like you are co-founding a company. And I think people, a lot of people, they have the money to spend, and they do investment on, they just purchase some, they just buy products from financial institutions. That's one thing. And if they want to take the risk, go with angel investment. Because I think 80% or maybe 90% of angel investment, they fail. That's what I think.
No, that is true. I was just thinking about, actually, we do have some instances where there are private Chinese individuals who are investing in early stage. A number of them invested,
right,
for instance, in SpaceX, right, at the very early stage, in Uber. They also are wanting to come and invest in European startups.
But I think that it takes a percentage, like maybe 20% of their assets.
But this, we tell everybody, first of all, any money that you invest should be money that you could lose.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, that's unfortunately, but that's the way it is. Second, you know, the most you should do is 5 or 10% of your, you know, of your portfolio. So indeed, you know, a business angel will have not only investments in startups, but in real estate as well. I've probably done much better in real estate than I have in anything else, you know. But what I really liked, Bellini, about what you were saying, is indeed this enabling of entrepreneurs, you know, with this interest loan, because in Europe, you have to literally put your house as collateral to get a loan. So, you know, if you can, if an entrepreneur can get a loan to get, you know, to get started, then you know, this is great. So I think this is a wonderful example of, you know, of government and entrepreneur and angel investing working together.
And then we have to define what entrepreneur is.
Yeah.
Like fresh graduate from college, they do startup. They might be entrepreneurs, but it's really difficult. But if you are an experienced professional and you can sell and be a supplier of the bigger company, I think it's very easy to get finance, and we do that too. And our interest rate is 4.8. So that's good for the entrepreneurs who are experienced professionals. In China, I think the angel investment, well, when people talk about startups or entrepreneurs or angel investment, they immediately think about college student. They do an app on the phone. And that's what we see, angel investment. Yeah. And a lot of times, but a lot of times, like angel, well, if you are investing in a company who is entrepreneur, who's a professional, and who can actually supply to mega companies, that is a good thing. But I don't think that's angel investment because...
No, it's not. It's not. But what you do have in China is you have a wonderful system of incubation and incubators. And also, even when I look at China Mobile, you know, they started this thing about, you know, let 1 million apps, not flowers, but 1 million apps bloom, you know, so, yeah.
Right, I think that's what the government did. They did the PPP, they did all the science parks through PPP projects, and then they do the incubators, and then also they lend money to the SMEs who needs the money.
Well, one of the things that struck me when I was out working in China and Hong Kong was, and it's particularly considering what we're learning about ICOs, is that so many restaurants I saw start with money contributed by a circle of friends, but not family. I mean, just friends. And you'd have entrepreneurs saying, hey, look, I will give, if you give me the equivalent of about $10,000, which your average middle-class Chinese urban civil servant or professional is able to afford, I will give you a certain percentage dividend per year. And it's interesting because it's kind of like a non-crypto tokenization, because of course if I invest in the restaurant, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to eat there and I'm going to bring all my friends. So it's very much like your return might be related to how assiduously you work, and the governments in both because it's two different regulators in both Hong Kong and China seem to feel this is okay. We don't have to do anything. So it's an interesting case where, I mean, obviously many of these restaurants won't succeed, but to me it's particularly interesting that the government's not saying anything about you need to license that offering, you need to check out your investors. No, it's just seen as a way of allowing people to use their savings.
Well, I think that is angel investment. People do that because they feel safe.
No. But I mean, usually when I spoke earlier today.
Well, that was a joke. That was not angel
Oh, okay,
investment.
okay,
Well,
okay.
but
Yeah,
that's just
because-
people feel safe doing that.
Yeah, no, it's because, really, in order for angel investing to be sustainable, you do need to be able to have exits.
true.
And when you have exits, you have some value that has been created and that is monetizable. So it is different, but yeah.
And so echo your question, like there are so many angels in China that they don't actually go public.
We have this problem in Europe too.
Right.
Well, so if that's the case, I mean, maybe you're suggesting that one of the things that governments should do is to find a way to make it more attractive socially and culturally to declare being an angel. If it's something that people do privately because there's some concern about it being more widely known, that's not a good thing, right?
No. I think that people just don't care. If angel investment is a small amount of money, and I don't think they most of the time they invest to people they know. So it's not a big deal if they want to go public saying, I invest in this company, and what if it turns to be a failure? That's actually a little bit of a shame. And I think that it's definitely a good thing that people are doing angel investment. There are so many people doing that in China. But I think they just invest in people they know. And however, I think it's not that efficient because a lot of talented young people or young professionals, they don't know that many people. They would rather, I think it's better for them to be a supplier of a mega company, and then they can get easier finance. They don't have to share their share.
This is true anywhere.
Right,
Whenever
right.
I invest in a company or in an entrepreneur, I always say you have to do a transformational deal. And a transformational deal for me is getting a contract with a mega company. And unless I see that transformational deal, and unless I know that entrepreneur can do a transformational deal, I don't invest.
It still doesn't mean it will succeed. And how do you? And so people, you have to have somehow a culture where people think it's okay to try and fail once in a while.
I don't think it's okay to fail.
It's money.
It's not okay to fail?
No, it's not. No,
Well,
I just want to make this very clear because all governments think that this is the message they have to give, that it's okay to fail. It is not okay to fail. Entrepreneurs never think that they have failed. They just have not succeeded yet. No,
Well,
no, and this is very important because unless an entrepreneur sees, quote unquote, a stumble along the way, but gets up and goes and gets that goal, that is being an entrepreneur. You do not fail.
Right.
You succeed. It may take a while, but you succeed.
So that's why we talked earlier about easy exits and restarts, right? And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, insolvency is a very difficult and time-consuming, sometimes endless process, which actually makes it almost impossible to have that situation where I haven't succeeded yet. I just need to tidy that up and move on.
But I also don't believe in bankruptcy or insolvency. No, there's always a way. You can always figure out a way to keep the value at least.
Maybe if you allow me, I would like
Please.
just to touch base or just to highlight one thing. And I agree with my colleagues here that we never saw Angeli's investment within a government project. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But for example, Angeli's investment in different countries, there is different culture of doing business. Going back to our experience, for example, when the government created the fund, which is a 10 billion Saudi riyal, represent like $3.5 billion, they create sub-fund from the main fund for private investors. So most of the project is related to the government. 80% is a government project. So what they say, okay, we create this fund, it's a 50 million fund. The government will put 25, for example. It's not that they require the cash, but we'd like to create an opportunity to the private sector or to the individual to make a money and to learn and to transfer know-how. So there is also an added value, not only a finance. And they create this fund and they say, okay, you invest with the government fund, and you will get a minimum of IRR, let's say 11%, which is a minimum. Okay. But provided you have to add in value, it's not only just making a money, you have to bring a value, you have to bring know-how to the fund.
Okay. So look, we're just out of time. Can I ask my panelists to give one tweet each to just give a final message at the end of the day? A tweet, that's 140 characters. So
Time to calculate.
So I'm going to turn to the youngest and therefore the most capable of giving us a tweet for a final message you want to say about government and angels.
In China.
What?
Twitter's not allowed in China.
Well, I think that people should do their asset allocation well and maybe put 10% of the total asset into angel investment because that most likely to be not successful. And they should put 90% of their money to our PPP projects.
And so this is why we had so much fun. So my tweet is think big, do infrastructure projects as an angel. I get very worried when the government has the idea and wants to do something and asks me to fund it. I'd much rather do it. I have the idea. The government can be my client, which happens quite a bit. So I very much believe in private entrepreneurial initiatives, private investing, and that for infrastructure projects as well.
We're getting some long tweets here. Okay, can you give us a real tweet?
For me, it's going to be very simple and very straightforward. Don't look at any governmental project. Don't look at any government. The government needs you. They need you not for your fund. They need you from your experience and to transfer technology.
Okay, my final tweet, support from behind, don't get in the way.
Yes.
That's a tweet. Okay, thank you very much to our panelists.
Matthew Ganser, thank you very much for leading the panel. Thank you very much, Candice Fistrosora. Thank you very much, Bellini. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful news. All right, thank you.